What would you do if someone walked into your home, slipped on your clothes, rearranged your kitchen, and announced they were staying forever? I'm asking you, not as a rhetorical trick, but because that was the exact moment my life flipped upside down. It was a Sunday morning, sunlight pushing through the blinds. I walked into the kitchen half awake, craving coffee, hoping for quiet. Instead, I froze. There she was, Linda, my mother-in-law, wearing one of my blouses. Not a random hoodie from the laundry basket, not an old t-shirt. A silk blouse I had bought for an interview years ago, something I'd kept carefully pressed at the back of my closet. She turned, spatula in hand, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, Sophia, you didn't mind, right?" It fits me so well. My first thought wasn't anger, it was disbelief. Did she really say that out loud? Did she really think she had the right? I glanced toward Ethan, my husband, sitting at the table with a forced smile, pretending to read his phone. He didn't say a word. I wanted to scream. Instead, I poured myself coffee with shaky hands, listening as Linda explained how she had reorganized the kitchen because my system didn't make sense. Plates stacked differently, spices moved, knives jammed into drawers I never used. The place I had spent months making mine felt suddenly foreign. And then came the bomb. She leaned back against the counter, casual, as if commenting on the weather. "George and I talked about it. We'll be staying here indefinitely. A few weeks, maybe months, who knows? It's better for everyone, better for everyone. For whom exactly? For her, yes. For George, probably. But for me? For us?" I felt the walls of my own home press closer, my chest tightened. I wanted to shout, "This is my house!" But the words got stuck. Have you ever had that moment? That instant when someone takes something of yours, something sacred, and acts like it never belonged to you? Maybe it wasn't a blouse. Maybe it wasn't your kitchen. Maybe it was your seat at work, your idea in a meeting, your role in a relationship. But you know that burn inside your chest, the quiet scream that no one else hears? I smiled. That's what I did. I smiled and nodded while my brain screamed. I asked, "Indefinitely?" As if I hadn't heard her correctly, she nodded. Ethan coughed, still staring at his phone, knuckles white. That silence from him hurt more than the invasion. Silence can be betrayal. I wanted to pull the blouse off her back. I wanted to open the door and push both of them out. Instead, I sat. I chewed toast that didn't taste like anything. My ears rang. Every clink of her spatula felt like a hammer striking my sanity. "You should be grateful," she added, sliding eggs onto Ethan's plate. "We're helping you." Rent is high. Groceries are expensive. Family sticks together. Family sticks together. But when does family stop being family and start becoming intruders? I kept replaying the moment I first saw the apartment. The exposed brick wall, the tiny balcony, the way I told Ethan, "This is ours." Flashback to that smile, that pride. Now it was gone. The balcony might as well belong to Linda's plants. The kitchen, her rules. My blouse, her outfit, and the worst part? Ethan's silence said, "I allow this." The rest of the day blurred. Boxes appeared in corners I hadn't noticed. George shuffled in and out, humming, like the place was his already. Every item I had chosen with care, sofa cushions, framed photos, even my coffee mugs, looked out of place under their touch. That night, lying awake, I kept hearing her words. Better for everyone. Better for whom? For you watching this, maybe it sounds small. Just a blouse, just a kitchen. But those small things were the cracks. And you know what happens to cracks. They widen. They split foundations. They bring the whole house down. So let me ask you again. What would you do if someone stepped into your space and erased the line between yours and theirs? Would you confront them? Would you swallow it to keep the peace? Or would you, like me, try to smile while your stomach churned? Because that was only the beginning. And if you think wearing my blouse was the worst of it, trust me, it was just the opening shot of a battle I never asked for. The first morning I caught Linda in my blouse. I told myself maybe it was just a shock I could get over. Maybe I was overreacting. But the truth? That moment was only the start. Day by day, the house I thought was mine began slipping through my fingers, one small detail at a time, until I barely recognized it. It started with the Wi-Fi. I came home from work, ready to unwind, ready to stream a show, and the connection wouldn't work. Password invalid. I typed it again, still wrong. I asked Ethan, and before he could answer, George leaned in from the couch, remote in hand. "Oh, I changed it. Your old password was too obvious. Don't worry, I'll text you the new one." Too obvious? This wasn't his network, it was mine. The Wi-Fi, the router, the bill, it all had my name on it. And yet he acted like the gatekeeper of my own home. Do you know that hollow pit in your stomach when something so small feels enormous because of what it represents? That was me, staring at George while Ethan sat silently beside him. And then the living room, my living room. George stretched out like a king on my sofa, shoes half off, TV volume blasting. He declared that the front room would be their space now since the light was better for his reading. My bookshelf? Cleared. My framed photos stacked on the floor. Instead, his fishing trophies and old baseball memorabilia crowded every surface. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood there frozen, clutching a grocery bag, watching my home rearrange itself without my permission. The worst part wasn't the Wi-Fi. It wasn't the photos on the floor. It was Ethan, my husband. When I looked at him, expecting him to say something, anything, he shrugged. It's temporary. They just need to feel comfortable. Comfortable? At my expense? At our expense? That shrug broke something in me. Silence is one thing. A shrug is surrender. A shrug is betrayal. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember the girl who had walked through this apartment for the first time. Flashback, me in my 20s, running my hands across the brick wall, telling Ethan, "This will be our sanctuary, our first real place." I remembered the pride in my voice, the way my chest swelled with joy. Now, that sanctuary was a cage, and the walls weren't made of brick anymore. They were invisible, built from every choice Ethan didn't make, every boundary he didn't protect. Maybe you've been there. Maybe it wasn't your house. Maybe it was your career, your friendship, your body. Someone crossed a line. Someone redrew the rules without asking, and the person you thought would stand beside you didn't. Tell me, what would you do? Would you fight? Or would you shrink the way I did at first, waiting for someone else to speak up? It's not just about furniture or Wi-Fi. It's about what happens when your home stops feeling like home. When your name is on the lease, but your voice no longer matters. I walked into the kitchen the next morning and found Linda reorganizing again, humming, as if the place had always belonged to her. And there was George, feet up, flipping channels. Ethan kissed my cheek on his way out the door, whispering, "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder for whom? For me, who felt erased in my own space? Or for him, who couldn't bear to confront the people he called family? I stood in that kitchen, coffee mug trembling in my hand, and I realized something painful. The invisible wall wasn't built by Linda or George. It was built by Ethan's silence. And every day I let it stand, the wall grew taller. So I'll ask you, if the person you trust most sides with the people taking from you, what choice do you have left? I thought I could handle the little things, the blouse, the kitchen, the Wi-Fi, the living room. I told myself if I ignored them, if I kept calm, it would all blow over. But then I stumbled on something I wasn't supposed to see, and suddenly every piece clicked into place. The invasion wasn't an accident. It wasn't temporary. It was planned. And Ethan, the one person I trusted most, knew all along. It started with a bank statement. Not mine, not ours, his. Ethan left his laptop open on the counter, the screen glowing in the dark kitchen after he'd gone to bed. I walked past, meaning only to close it. But then I saw the words, "Joint withdrawal authorized," and my breath caught. The number wasn't small thousands from our savings. A savings account I thought only the two of us touched. Authorized by whom? Not me, I scrolled. Line after line of withdrawals, all around the time Linda and George moved in. My pulse raced. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the laptop. I felt heat rising in my face, the kind that comes from betrayal you can't yet name. The next morning, I asked Ethan directly, "Did you know your parents were planning to stay longer than a week?" I expected hesitation, maybe guilt, but what I got was worse. He sighed, rubbed his forehead, and said, "They mentioned it months ago. I didn't think it would matter. It's just family. Just family." Those two words gutted me. Family doesn't secretly raid your savings. Family doesn't redraw the boundaries of your marriage without asking. And family doesn't make you feel like a stranger in your own home. Do you know that moment when the floor gives out beneath you, but you're still standing? That was me, staring at Ethan across the table, realizing the man I built my life with had chosen silence. Silence that gave them permission. Silence that made me small. And then came the proof. Linda bragged one night, wine glass in hand, laughing too loudly. Well, at least Ethan was smart enough to help with the mortgage. We couldn't have moved this quickly without his support. Help with the mortgage, support. My brain spun. She wasn't talking about their mortgage. She was talking about mine, our apartment. The place I worked 2 jobs to afford. Ethan had signed something, given something, without a word to me. I excused myself, locked myself in the bathroom, and pressed my forehead against the cold mirror. My reflection didn't even look like me anymore. So I started paying attention, listening harder, digging in places I'd ignored. I found texts on Ethan's phone, casual ones, from months before I even knew they planned to visit. "Don't worry, Mom. She'll adjust. We'll figure it out once you're here. She'll adjust." That was me, not a partner, not a wife, just an obstacle to be managed. I wanted to scream, but instead I fell silent. Silence can be power too. Have you ever hidden what you know, just to see how far someone else will go when they think you're blind? That's where I was. But inside, the storm was building. Every moment with them became unbearable. Every laugh from the living room, every plate rearranged in the kitchen, every late-night sigh from Ethan, it all sounded like betrayal. And then, one night, Linda looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Sophia, I hope you understand. This is best for everyone. Best for everyone." The same words she used the morning she wore my blouse. The circle closed, and I realized nothing would change until I acted. So I made a decision, a dangerous one. I began documenting everything, notes, dates, photos. I hid receipts in my desk drawer. I saved copies of bank statements. I became a ghost in my own home, collecting evidence. And while I smiled at dinner, while I laughed at George's jokes, I was planning, quietly, patiently. I was already gone in my mind. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to disappear first. I'll tell you what I did with all that evidence. I'll tell you where I went when I walked out without a word, but not yet. Because before I vanished, something else happened that sealed my resolve forever. Linda mentioned borrowing money for renovations. George hinted at adding their name to something they had no right to touch. And Ethan? He sat there, nodding, while I felt myself shrinking into dust. Have you ever realized the person you thought was your protector was actually holding the door open for your enemies? That's the truth I lived. That's the truth Ethan hid. And that truth is why, one night soon after, I packed a bag, slipped out the door, and left no trace behind. But that's the next part of the story. The night I uncovered Ethan's betrayal, I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of footsteps from the living room. Every sound felt sharper, like the house itself was reminding me, this isn't yours anymore. When the sun finally rose, I knew what I had to do. I didn't announce it. I didn't yell. I didn't pack a suitcase in front of anyone. I moved quietly, deliberately, like a shadow slipping through cracks no one bothered to notice. First, I made copies, bank statements, screenshots of Ethan's texts, notes I'd been keeping in my phone, dates, times, the exact words Linda and George had said. I slipped everything into a folder and tucked it in my tote bag, the same bag I carried to work every day. Next, I reached out, a lawyer. Not one of those flashy billboard names, but a woman recommended by a coworker. Sharp, discreet, known for handling family disputes that got ugly. I didn't call from my phone. I used a payphone outside a gas station 2 blocks away. When was the last time you used a payphone? My hands shook dialing those metal buttons, but the anonymity steadied me. She answered, calm and professional. I told her only enough to secure a meeting. My voice cracked when I said, I don't feel safe in my own home. She didn't ask for proof yet. She just said, come in tomorrow, bring everything. Tomorrow. That gave me less than 24 hours to prepare. So I made myself invisible. At dinner, I smiled. I passed the salt when George asked. I nodded when Linda bragged about how she fixed the spice rack. Inside, my chest ached with every word. Do you know what it's like to eat across from the people who've stolen your peace and pretend you don't see it? To act like you're fine, while every fiber of your being screams otherwise? That night, after everyone was asleep, I packed a small bag, clothes, toothbrush, my folder of evidence. That was it. No note, no explanation. If Ethan wanted to know why, he could look in the mirror. When I walked out the door, the air hit me like a slap. Cold, sharp, real. I breathed it in, deeper than I had in weeks. My footsteps echoed on the pavement. For the first time in a long time, those steps felt like mine. I checked into a motel on the edge of town, dingy carpet, faded curtains. But to me it was sanctuary. 4 walls no one else controlled. A lock only I had the key to. I turned off my phone, sat on the bed, and let the silence swallow me whole. For 5 days I didn't go home. Ethan called. He texted. At first they were casual. Where are you? Did you work late? Then they grew frantic. Sophia, please. Where are you? I didn't respond. Because sometimes silence is the only language that cuts through lies. In that motel room, I spread everything out on the bed, statements, screenshots, receipts. I arranged them like puzzle pieces, proof that my sanity wasn't just paranoia. Every photo of a missing plate, every text where Ethan promised them space, every withdrawal. It all painted one undeniable picture. I met with the lawyer on the 3rd day. She listened without interrupting, only nodding, scribbling notes, her eyes sharp but sympathetic. When I finished, she said something that both terrified me and gave me hope. You have a case. But it won't be easy. They'll fight back. Fight back. The words lingered. Linda and George weren't the type to leave quietly. And Ethan, my Ethan, he wasn't on my side anymore. That night, lying in the motel bed, I whispered to myself, I left, and no one knows where I am. Saying it out loud made it real. I was gone. And for the first time, I felt a flicker of control again. But here's the thing about disappearing. You can only stay invisible for so long. At some point, you have to step back into the light. And when I did, I wasn't going back empty-handed. I'll tell you exactly what happened the moment I returned, how the living room became a courtroom, how silence finally broke. But that's the next chapter. For now, I'll leave you with this question. If you discovered the people closest to you had planned your erasure, would you stay and fight in the shadows, or vanish, just long enough to come back stronger? When I walked back into my apartment after those 5 silent days, the air felt different, heavy, tense, like even the walls were bracing for what I was about to do. My tote bag dug into my shoulder. Inside it, every scrap of evidence I had collected. Paper didn't weigh much, but proof is heavy. Linda was the first to notice me. She looked up from the couch, remote in hand like it was her throne. George sat beside her, flipping through the mail as if he lived there. Ethan rose halfway, relief flashing across his face. "Sophia, thank God!" I cut him off. "Sit down." The tone of my voice startled even me. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, steady. The kind of tone that tells everyone in the room, this isn't a request. My hands trembled slightly as I set the tote on the coffee table, but I made sure they saw none of that weakness. "Tonight," I said, "we're going to tell the truth." From the bag, I pulled the first folder, bank statements, highlighted withdrawals, dates that matched perfectly with the days Linda and George had taken shopping trips. I laid them flat on the table. The silence was thick. Ethan's eyes darted from the papers to his parents, then back to me. "This is our money," I said. "And you knew." His lips parted, no words. Linda huffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Families share," I snapped. "Families don't steal. Families don't change locks on Wi-Fi. Families don't wear someone else's clothes and call it hospitality." Then I did the thing no one expected. I reached for the small USB drive. I had borrowed a neighbor's camera, the one in the hallway, weeks of footage. Clip after clip of Linda entering my apartment with bags, rearranging shelves, George barking orders at Ethan as if he were still a boy. I plugged it into the TV, hit play. And suddenly, the living room wasn't a living room anymore. It was a courtroom. Linda's face frozen on the screen, rummaging through my drawers. George caught on camera muttering, "She won't fight us." The evidence was undeniable. My neighbors, curious from the raised voices, began to gather in the hallway. Someone knocked. Then someone else lingered by the door, and I let them. I wanted witnesses. I wanted people to see what had been done to me. "Do you want to explain this?" I asked, pointing at the frozen image of Linda holding up one of my blouses like it was hers. She sputtered. That's taken out of context." George slammed his hand on the armrest. "Turn that off." "No," I said calmly. "Not until everyone here understands." Ethan finally spoke. His voice cracked. "Sophia, I didn't think it would go this far." I turned to him, my chest tight. "You let it go this far." "You let them tear down everything we built." My lawyer's voice echoed in my head. "You need witnesses. You need undeniable proof." And in that moment, I had both. I faced the hallway, where neighbors were whispering, watching. "You've all seen how this apartment changed, how they moved in like it was theirs. You've seen me disappear. Now you see the truth." The silence that followed was damning. Not for me, but for them. Linda stood, her face pale, but the bravado still clung to her voice. "We were just helping." "This isn't what it looks like." I gestured to the screen. "It looks exactly like what it is. Theft, manipulation, invasion." Then slowly, the weight of the evidence crushed her. She sank back into the couch, words drying up. George looked away, jaw tight. For the first time, they seemed small. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He reached for me. "Sophia, please, I'll fix this. I'll tell them to leave. Just don't give up on me." My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to cry, to crumble. But instead, I stood taller. "This isn't about giving up on you, Ethan," I said softly but firmly. "This is about not giving up on myself." The neighbors, sensing the climax had passed, drifted away. The screen still glowed, frozen on Linda's guilty frame. That night, Linda and George left. They didn't slam the door. They didn't shout. They just gathered their things in silence, shadows of the storm they had once been. Ethan lingered, broken, begging with his eyes. But even as he reached for me, I knew trust was no longer simple. Was I relieved? Yes. Vindicated? Absolutely. But was it over? Deep down, I knew the battle had only shifted shape. And I'll ask you this. If someone shattered your trust so completely, would you let them back in? Or would you keep the door locked forever? I thought it was over after that night. When Linda and George left with their bags and their pride shattered, I believed the storm had finally passed. My apartment felt lighter, like I could breathe again. I walked from room to room, touching walls, opening drawers, reclaiming what was mine. For a few weeks, I let myself hope. And then, 2 pink lines on a stick changed everything. I was pregnant. The joy hit first, a wave so overwhelming I had to sit on the bathroom floor just to steady myself. My hands pressed against my stomach, flat and silent, but suddenly holding a whole new world. But right after joy came fear. Because in my mind, I saw their faces, Linda's sharp eyes, George's heavy steps, and Ethan's hesitation. Do you know that feeling when happiness is shadowed before you even taste it? That was me. I wanted to shout the news, but my heart whispered, "Don't, not yet." Still, Ethan had a right to know. So I told him one night over dinner. His fork clattered against the plate. For a moment, he looked like the boy I once fell in love with. Hopeful, wide-eyed, scared, but ready. He grabbed my hand and said, "We'll make this work. I'll be better." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But Linda and George somehow knew before I was ready to tell anyone else. Maybe Ethan slipped. Maybe they were just watching too closely. One morning, Linda knocked at my door carrying a basket of baby clothes. She didn't even wait for me to answer. She walked in, smiling wide. "We're so happy for you," she said, her hands already on my belly as if it belonged to her. George followed behind, his voice booming. "You'll need support. We'll move back in, just until the baby comes. You'll thank us later." I froze. The walls I had rebuilt, brick by fragile brick, began to crack all over again. I said no, firm, loud. But Linda only smiled like I was a child having a tantrum. "Sophia, sweetie, you've been under so much stress. You're emotional. We'll handle things." And then came the blow I never saw coming. Papers. A petition filed with the court. Linda and George were seeking temporary guardianship rights for my unborn child. Their claim? That I was mentally unstable. That the stress of the past months proved I was unfit to be a mother. I still remember the moment I read those words. My knees buckled. My hand shook so violently the paper crumpled. Mentally unstable? Because I fought back? Because I protected my home? The unfairness burned like fire in my chest. I wanted to scream until the walls cracked, but instead, I sat in silence, staring at those lines over and over until the words blurred. Do you know what betrayal feels like when it comes dressed as concern? It feels like drowning in daylight. Ethan walked in later, holding the mail. He saw the papers in my hand, his face going pale. "Sophia, I didn't know they'd—" I cut him off. Didn't know, or didn't stop them? He had no answer, and in that silence, I realized the truth. Linda wasn't fighting for the baby. She was fighting for control. Control she had lost, control she craved, and George was her soldier. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the couch, lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of the streetlights outside. My hand rested on my stomach. "I will protect you," I whispered. "No matter what it takes." And then another thought struck me. What if they convinced people? What if a judge believed their lies? What if my baby was taken before I even got the chance to hold them? The stakes had never been higher. It wasn't about a kitchen or Wi-Fi passwords anymore. It wasn't about clothes or savings. This was my child, my future, my entire identity as a mother, I won't lie. Part of me wanted to collapse, to let someone else carry the weight. But that wasn't an option. Because once you become a mother, even before the first heartbeat is heard, your fight multiplies. So I gathered myself, wiped my tears, and started planning. But I'll ask you this. What would you do if the very people who once invaded your home now tried to invade your motherhood? Would you let them rewrite your story? Or would you draw a line so deep no one could ever cross it again? Because for me, there was no choice left. The courthouse smelled like dust and fear. My heels clicked against the tiled floor, sharp and steady, though inside my legs felt like they could give way at any second. I held my file tight against my chest, every paper, every photo, every record carefully collected. It wasn't just evidence. It was my shield. My proof that I wasn't the unstable woman they wanted me to be. When the judge called my name, my heart pounded so loudly I thought everyone in the room could hear it. Linda sat straight-backed on the other side, pearls at her neck, eyes gleaming with false calm. George leaned forward, fists clenched, looking ready for war. And Ethan? He sat between us, eyes down, torn apart. Their lawyer spoke first, painting me as fragile, unfit, volatile. He used words like emotional outbursts and erratic behavior, words that turned my pain into a weapon against me. I wanted to scream. Of course I was emotional. You invaded my life, but I held it in. I needed control now more than ever. Then came my turn. My lawyer stood, calm and direct, and handed the judge a small flash drive. "Your Honor," he said. "What you're about to see demonstrates the truth of this family dynamic." The screen lit up. A shaky video from my hallway camera, Linda entering without knocking. Her voice sharp. "This is my house now." George's laughter as he unplugged my router. Ethan's silence in the background, his shadow framed in the doorway. Every word echoed in the courtroom. I watched Linda's face tighten. For the first time, she looked small, exposed. The performance cracked, and the truth bled through. The judge paused the footage. Silence hung heavy. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "Mrs. Linda, Mr. George, your petition for guardianship is denied. You have overstepped." Relief flooded me so hard my knees almost buckled. I wanted to cry, to laugh, to collapse all at once. I turned slightly, hand on my belly, whispering a promise to the child inside me. "We're safe." But the moment wasn't done. Ethan leaned forward, his voice trembling. "Mom, Dad, please stop. You're tearing everything apart." Linda snapped back. "We're protecting you. We're protecting the baby." And Ethan, finally, looked at me. His eyes met mine for the first time in weeks, maybe months. "No, she's protecting us. She always has." The courtroom held its breath. I didn't answer. I just watched him, waiting to see if his words meant action. Because here's the truth. Winning the case wasn't the end. It was a boundary drawn in ink and law, yes, but the real boundary had to be drawn in our lives. Ethan had to choose. Would he remain their son first, or would he become the father of our child, the partner I needed? I saw the weight in his eyes. He knew what was at stake. He knew there was no middle ground anymore. And maybe that's the hardest part of setting boundaries. You don't just push others out, you force the people closest to you to decide where they stand. The judge's gavel fell. The case was closed. But my story? It wasn't about victory in a courtroom. It was about reclaiming my voice, my home, my role as a mother. So let me leave you with this. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. It's love in its fiercest form. And if you've ever felt your space, your dignity, or your future slipping through someone else's hands, you know exactly what I mean. Now, I'll ask you, have you ever had to draw a line so deep it changed your life forever? If you have, I'd love to hear your story, because maybe sharing it isn't just healing for you, it might be the lifeline someone else needs right now. When the judge's gavel came down, I thought the sound would echo forever, sharp, final, liberating. But when I pushed the door open to my apartment that evening, it wasn't liberation I felt. It was silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't name. The apartment looked the same. Same pale curtains, same framed photo of Ethan and me at the beach, same coffee table that still bore faint scratches from George's heavy briefcase. But everything was coated in something invisible, like a film of dust, except it wasn't dust. It was absence. The absence of noise, of argument, of intrusion. You would think that was a relief. But for me, it was unnerving. I put my keys down. The sound of metal against wood rang out too loud, too clear. That's when I realized I'd gotten used to chaos, to voices overlapping, to footsteps in every room, to the constant sense of someone watching, judging. And now, stripped of that, all that remained was the hollow space between me and Ethan. He was already home. Sitting at the kitchen counter, a mug in front of him, steam barely curling anymore. He looked up when I entered, his eyes soft but tired. "Hey," he said, like we were strangers passing in a hallway. I forced a smile. "Hey," that was it. 2 syllables, and then we let silence settle again. You know how some silences are comfortable? Like a blanket? This wasn't that. This was the kind of silence that scratches at the back of your throat. The kind you want to break but can't, because if you do, everything might spill out too fast. I sat across from him, my hands wrapped around the mug he slid toward me. It was still warm, but lukewarm, like effort that arrived too late. I stared at it and thought about how many mugs I'd held in this apartment. Coffee at dawn after we first moved in. Wine in the evenings when we planned our future. And now this. Lukewarm tea that neither of us really wanted to drink. A flashback hit me then. I remembered the day we moved in. I was barefoot, dancing across the empty living room. The sun lit up the walls, and Ethan twirled me around, laughing, his shirt untucked, hair messy from hauling boxes. We ate pizza straight from the box, sitting on the floor because we didn't even have chairs yet. I'd leaned my head on his shoulder and whispered, "This place will be our start." Back then, the silence had been golden. Back then, it was possibility. Now it was rubble. The flashback faded, and I was back at the table, staring at Ethan. He shifted, his fingers drumming once against his mug. Small sounds, but they broke the quiet just enough for me to breathe. "I know I failed you," he said suddenly. His voice cracked, low and rough. My throat tightened. I waited for the swell of anger that usually came with those words, but instead, I just felt tired. "Failed me," I repeated, softer. The words felt like stones tumbling down a hill. He nodded. His gaze dropped to the mug like it held answers. I thought I was protecting us, but all I did was... He stopped, swallowed, tried again. "All I did was break you." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted those words to fix what was cracked. But trust doesn't mend with apologies alone. Trust is like porcelain. Once it's fractured, you might glue it back, but the cracks are always there. And that's when the question hit me. What's left when trust is cracked? I let the question sit in the silence. Not just for me, but for anyone listening to my story right now. Because maybe you've been there. Maybe you've looked at someone you once trusted with your life and realized you no longer knew how to sit in a room with them without feeling hollow. I opened my eyes and looked around. The little signs of distance were everywhere. My scarf still draped over the armchair where I'd thrown it 2 days ago. His shoes lined up perfectly by the door, like he was clinging to some idea of order. The bed unmade, covers twisted from nights of sleeping on opposite edges. The silence grew teeth. I thought about how victory in court hadn't solved the war inside these walls. Linda and George were gone, yes, but the damage they left behind lingered. They had carved wedges between us, and Ethan had handed them the knife. I sipped the tea, bitter, watery. Not how I liked it. Another small reminder that even his efforts couldn't reach me. Not yet. "Do you want to talk about it?" Ethan asked finally. His voice was tentative, like he was afraid my answer would cut. I met his eyes. For the first time, I didn't see defiance there. I saw fear. Fear of losing me completely, and part of me wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap. But another part, the bigger part, wasn't ready. So I just shook my head. "Not tonight." He nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth twitching like he wanted to argue but knew better. And just like that, we were back in silence. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Ethan's breathing was steady beside me, but it didn't comfort me. It felt like two rhythms out of sync. I thought about all we'd been through and all we hadn't said. I thought about the flashback again, pizza on the floor, laughter bouncing off bare walls. And I wondered if that couple still lived here, or if they had packed up and left long ago. Silence has a way of magnifying thoughts, of making you hear things you don't want to hear. I heard the echo of Linda's accusations. I heard George's footsteps in the hallway. I even heard the slam of the gavel, reminding me I'd won the battle but not the war. And in that silence, I realized something important. Battles can end in court, but healing has to happen at home. And right now, our home wasn't healed. It was wounded. So I'll ask you, have you ever won something that still felt like losing? Because that's what that silence was. My trophy, my victory, was a hollow room filled with cracks I didn't know how to repair. The envelope didn't look dangerous. It was thin, off-white, the kind you buy in bulk at a drugstore. No return address, just my name in a careful cursive that tried too hard to be gentle. I found it wedged between a coupon flyer and a dentist reminder. The metal of the mailbox still cool against my fingers. Morning light spilled down the stairwell like it was proud of itself. Birds argued on the fire escape. A normal day, if you ignored the hum under my skin that hasn't left since the courthouse. I almost threw it out, almost. But there was something in the handwriting, tight, self-conscious, a little too pretty, that made my stomach dip. I knew that script, Linda. I stood in the hallway and stared at it the way you study a closed door in a horror movie. You're safe as long as you don't open it, right? Except safety is a lie when your brain writes the letter for you anyway, so I went upstairs, set the mail on the kitchen counter, washed my hands like paper could carry a virus. Then I sat and slit the envelope with the edge of a butter knife. The first line made my throat close. "Dear Sophia, I hope this finds you in a calm moment." I heard her voice as I read it, measured, sugary, coated with that patience she wears like perfume, calm moment. As if calm is a thing that arrives by mail, my eyes kept moving. I didn't want them to, but they did. I realized things have escalated further than anyone wished. Anyone? Anyone who filed a guardianship petition against my unborn child? Anyone who called me unstable in front of a judge? I felt heat in my face, the kind that creeps up your neck like a rash. I set the paper down and looked around my kitchen, then out the window toward the brick wall across the alley. Deep breath. Another. Then I picked it back up. We did what we did out of love. There it was, the thesis. The pretty ribbon tied too tight, love, as a defense. Love as a weapon. My fingers smoothed the page even as I wanted to crumple it. I could picture her at the dining table writing this, pearl earrings on, mug of chamomile, the kind of silence she believes is holy because it's hers. The letter went on, line after line. She said she regretted any distress I felt. She believed I misinterpreted their intentions. She wrote that motherhood is a heavy mantle, and she, as a mother, had no choice but to intervene when she perceived risk, a word that can be stretched over anything if you yank hard enough. I read one paragraph 3 times. Please try to see it from our side. We have watched Ethan drift away from his family, from values that kept him safe. We stepped in because we feared for his future and yours. We were wrong in method, not in heart. Wrong in method, not in heart. That's not an apology, that's a rebrand. I pushed the letter aside and stared at the wall. The paint near the stove had a faint splash mark from a night months ago when sauce boiled over and I laughed, red freckles scattering across the tile. I remembered Ethan kissing my shoulder while I wiped it clean. For 10 seconds, I let that version of us exist again. Then I came back to the woman at this table, pregnant and exhausted, reading a letter from the person who tried to take her child. And yet, here's the part I hate admitting, I felt a small tremor of relief. My name in ink, no lawyers, no petitions, no sudden knocks at the door, just words that didn't threaten, not out loud. My shoulders loosened a fraction. Then I found the next paragraph. I know the court disagreed. We accept the decision, though it broke our hearts. Still, we hope you consider a more structured involvement for us once the baby comes. It would be a shame for a child to grow up deprived of grandparents who care so deeply. Structured involvement, deprived. That was her talent. To position control as generosity and resistance as cruelty. If I say no, I am depriving. If I say yes, I am rescued. Do you hear the trap in that? Have you ever heard someone frame your boundaries like selfishness dressed as dignity? I paced the kitchen, letter in hand. My heartbeat sounded like shoes on tile. I wanted to call my lawyer. I wanted to call no one. I wanted to burn the page. Instead, I sat back down and kept reading because sometimes the fastest way through the fog is one more step. We would like to start fresh. We promise to respect your space and your role as the mother. Perhaps we can agree on regular visits, Sundays for instance, and a plan for emergencies where we are contacted first if you need help. It was almost comical. Start fresh, followed by a schedule and a chain of command that put them first. Respect your role, and then define it for you. I could feel the old panic try to climb back up my throat, but there was something else in me now, too. An iron thread that formed the day I stood in front of a judge and didn't crumble. I touched my stomach. Not this time, I whispered. The fridge hummed like it agreed. I set the letter down again and let my eyes blur. For a few seconds, I drifted somewhere between then and now. Flashback. Linda in my blouse, smiling like ownership. George with his shoes on my couch, Ethan looking through me like I was a window. Then the courthouse, the flash of the screen, Linda's voice recorded. The judges, denied. You don't forget the moment a system not built for you still chooses you. The gavel had been a sound, yes, but also a seam. It stitched me back to myself. So why did this piece of paper make me shake? Because words can do what locks can't. They can slip under doors. They can curl around your certainty. They can make you question the ground you just paved. I forced myself to read the final lines. We love you, Sophia, truly. We want what is best. We hope you can find it in your heart to forgive the way we went about it. Families heal when they stay close. Families heal when they stay close. I thought of proximity like a bruise. Press harder, it darkens. Give space, it fades. Maybe closeness heals when it's chosen, when there is consent. when respect lives beneath it like a foundation. But closeness without boundaries isn't love. It's gravity without ground. I folded the letter in thirds, crisp, careful. Then I unfolded it and read the first lines again because I'm human, and humans double-check the fire even after we turned off the stove. My eyes caught one more sentence I had skimmed before. If you decide to keep us at a distance, we will respect it, though it will break Ethan's heart to lose his parents. There it was, tucked like a thorn under a rose. It will break Ethan's heart. The kind of sentence that pretends to be compassion, but aims straight at the guilt center. Another reminder that my choices would be weighed against his pain, as if my pain wasn't also heavy. I slid the letter back into its envelope, stared at my name one more time, at the loop of the S, at the flourish on the A. Then I opened the drawer where we keep the takeout menus and rubber bands and put it there, between a faded pizza flyer and a packet of soy sauce. Not the trash, because part of me wasn't done with it. Not the fridge, because it didn't deserve display. Somewhere in the middle, where no one looks unless they're searching for something they can't name. I stood for a minute with the drawer open, breathing the smell of paper and dust and dried ginger. My hand hovered. Then I closed it. The soft thud felt like a period I wasn't ready to write. Ethan came in from the bedroom, hair damp from a shower, sleeves pushed to his elbows like he was ready to fix something he couldn't touch. He saw my face and paused. Everything okay? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say no. I settled on the only honest thing I had. I got a letter. His eyes flicked to the counter. From them? I nodded. Do you want to? He started, then stopped, because the last time he finished a question like that, he offered to speak for me, and we both know where that road leads. Not yet, I said, and I meant it. Not out of fear, out of strategy, out of self-respect. He nodded slowly, hands sliding into his pockets, eyes searching my face for a map. There wasn't one. There was only this kitchen, this drawer, this day. I don't know what you would do with a letter like that. Maybe you'd call and scream. Maybe you'd forgive. Maybe you'd frame it as evidence that people can change. I don't have that clarity yet. What I have is a heartbeat under my hand and a home that feels both fragile and fiercely mine. So I'm asking you, when someone who hurt you writes, "We did it for love," what do you hear? Do you hear a door opening or the hinges of the old trap creaking back to life? I turned off the kitchen light. The room slipped into a soft gray. The letter stayed in the drawer, quiet as a sleeping snake. I walked to the window and watched the city breathe. Somewhere, a siren. Somewhere, a laugh. Inside me, a small steady drum I've started to recognize not as fear, but as resolve. Tomorrow we'll ask for decisions. Tonight, I keep the drawer closed. I didn't sleep the night after the letter. I lay awake listening to the radiator tick and the city breathe, feeling the baby roll like a tide under my ribs. The drawer in the kitchen might as well have been a siren. I could hear it through the wall. The hush of paper, the hiss of words that tried to sound like mercy. We did it for you. Morning arrived pale and honest. I boiled water. The kettle screamed. I let it. Ethan shuffled in, hair haunted, hands already searching for something to hold that wasn't me. He reached for 2 mugs, set them down with care like fragile evidence. Do you want to talk about the letter? He asked. Yes, I said. It surprised both of us, how steady that word sounded in the room. We sat at the table we once built with an Allen key and too much optimism. Steam rose between us. I watched it thin and vanish, and it felt like a metaphor too easy to ignore. I read it twice, I began. 3 times, actually. It says love a lot, he said. His jaw tightened. That's how she operates. She says she'll respect distance, I continued, but only if I accept the blame for breaking your heart. He flinched like I'd slapped him, And for a second, I hated Linda for putting that line in my mouth, for making me the echo of her weapon. I softened. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because I need us to name the tricks when we see them. He nodded. You're right. A small silence. Then, what do you want? Not what should we do? Not what does the lawyer think? What do you want? The question landed carefully in front of me like a folded map. I thought about safety, about peace that doesn't apologize for itself, about my child learning that love has doors with locks that click, not because we're cruel, but because we're careful. I thought about homes where boundaries are furniture, visible in use, moved with intention. I want to build a life where we aren't constantly rehearsing our defenses, I said. I want to laugh in this kitchen again. I want to sleep without preparing an argument in my head. I want our baby to know family as a choice, not an obligation. And if your parents want to be in our child's life, they have to meet the standard of respect we set, not the one that's convenient for them. He stared at his hands. I should have done this for you before. You should have done it with me, I said. Then I took a breath and laid the foundation I'd been drafting in my chest. We can't build a family if the walls are full of cracks. His eyes lifted. They were wet. Say it again. We can't build a family if the walls are full of cracks. Something inside him crumpled and unknotted at the same time. He covered his face with his palms, shoulders shaking. The sound that came out of him wasn't loud. It was small. A boy lost in a man's body finally stepping off a road that hurt his feet. I froze, surprised. This was our pattern interrupt, unplanned. Ethan crying, not out of guilt's performance, but grief's release. I moved my chair closer, not to fix him, to witness him. Sometimes that's all two people can do. Watch each other become honest. When he looked up, his face was open in a way I hadn't seen in months. I choose you, he said, voice raw. Not as an apology, as a promise. Whatever it takes to keep our home ours, we'll do it. But I need you to know something, I braced. I can't flip a switch and unlearn the training, he said. I spent my whole life being their son first. I will mess up. Not because I don't love you, but because I'm rewiring. Can you be patient with me while I get this right? The honesty steadied me. This wasn't a grand gesture, it was a blueprint. And blueprints are how buildings stop collapsing. Yes, I said, if we're building together. Patience doesn't mean I live without boundaries. It means I hold the door open for your growth, but the threshold stays mine. He exhaled. Relief, fear, both. Then let's start. We made a list. Not romantic, not cinematic, practical. No contact without both of our consent. All messages go through a shared email address we control together. No surprise visits, ever. If they show up, we don't open the door. We call the police if needed. Any future contact requires a written acknowledgement from them, admitting harm and agreeing to terms. Therapy for us, non-negotiable. A timeline for trust to be measured in behaviors, not declarations. We wrote it on a yellow legal pad. The lines looked like rails I could stand on without slipping. What about the letter? He asked, glancing toward the kitchen drawer like it could hear us. We document it, I said. We send a response through the lawyer, clear, kind, firm, no Sunday schedules, no emergency chains that start with them. We'll define involvement after the baby arrives, and only if they demonstrate change over time. He nodded. I'll sign whatever we need to sign, a beat. I'll call my therapist today. I felt something shift under my sternum, a plank settling, a beam locking into place. I rested my palm on my belly. The baby rolled as if nudging, yes. We took a walk after breakfast. The air had the fragile brightness of early spring, the kind that makes everything look like it belongs to a better story. We passed the laundromat with the flickering open sign, the bodega cat draped like royalty on a stack of paper towels, the bakery blasting out warm sugar air, Ordinary magic. I hadn't tasted it in a while. Ethan reached for my hand and then stopped, asking with his eyes. I let him lace his fingers through mine. The grip was gentle, not possessive. We walked like two people learning to be new. On the way back, we bought a small plant for the kitchen, something alive we could keep on purpose. The cashier wrapped it in brown paper and said, "Careful, it doesn't like too much water." I smiled. Neither do I. Back home, we set the plant by the window. Sun pooled at its feet like a promise. Then we opened the drawer. The envelope lay where I left it, quiet and cunning. Together, we placed it in a clear folder marked Correspondence, along with a typed summary Ethan drafted while I read it one last time to make sure nothing could be twisted later. We stored the folder in a locked box with our other documentation. Then we wrote the response, plain language, no theatrics. We received your letter. We are establishing a boundary for the well-being of our household and our child. At this time, there will be no visits, schedules, or emergency plans involving you. Any future contact will be considered after sustained changes in behavior, to be evaluated by us. Do not come to our home. Do not contact us individually. All written communication must go through the email below. We read it aloud. No tremor in my voice. Ethan hit send. The whoosh sounded like something flying away that never belonged to us. The rest of the day unfolded softly. I napped. Ethan made soup. We ate with the window open, listening to the city's orchestra, horns, laughter, a dog barking like it had heroic news. At dusk, he pulled out a notebook labeled Baby, and we made a different kind of list. Names we liked, books we wanted to read aloud, lullabies we remembered from childhood. Healing doesn't always ask for grand endings. Sometimes it asks for soup and lists and the courage to hope out loud. Night fell. I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and took in the small, ordinary peace the bed made. The lamp throwing a circle of gentle gold. The plant in the kitchen, leaves pointed toward tomorrow. I thought about how endings are really thresholds. How drawing a line isn't just against something. It's towards something else. Before turning off the light, I looked into the camera and spoke to you, the person who's been sitting with me through every crack and climb. If you've ever had to start over after the storm, I asked, how did you rebuild? What did your first brick look like? Because this is mine, a clear email, a crying husband choosing honesty over habit, a baby kicking under my hand, a plant that prefers just enough water, no more, no less. Tomorrow I'll wake up and choose this again. That's the work, isn't it? Not a single line in the sand, but the daily, deliberate drawing of our home's shape, the quiet courage of choosing tomorrow,